before I was 8, I could shoot every gun we owned.
Welcome to the ladies of Tellico Village. My name is Joan Dorsey, and this show features interviews with some of the most fascinating and talented women living right here in Tellico Village. I know you'll enjoy today's remarkable lady. Her story is special, her life has been remarkable, and I feel so honored to have her here today to share it all with us. Sit back and enjoy this episode brought to you by the volunteers at Tellico Village Broadcasting. I'm Joan Dorsey, and this is another episode of the Ladies of Tellico Village. My guest today is really very special. She's not just a lady of Tellico Village, she is a Southern lady of Tellico Village. That means she was born and raised in Tennessee, has never lived anywhere other than the South. Technically, she's what we can call an honest and real Southern belle. So I would like to officially welcome my guest, Jane Venable. Jane, welcome.
Oh, thank you.
Now, I want to talk for a minute or two about these books before we really get rolling. This book represents your mother's side of your family. Just tell me briefly a couple of things about how this came about.
Well, they have been in the United States since the Indians, I think. And they are in Louisville, Kentucky. And it's the Speed family, S-P-E-E-D, and my middle name is Speed. And Frank, when he was mad at me, always called me Speed. So.
And Frank was her husband.
Yes, yes.
The other book is a wonderful book. It's huge. Before I ask her to comment on that, I'm going to show you a section that I marked. Actually, it was marked before me. I didn't read this whole book. Is the pages that are devoted to her father's side of the family, and this is current. Jane and her 3 children are in this section of the book, and she's a legitimate part of this family, which is well, it's many families, because all of you know that cousins married cousins many times because there weren't that many people here in the beginning. It's the Hartmans, and that was my maiden name, and the Myers, M-Y-E-R-S. And the man that put this together is pictured on the back with his little boy, so he's young.
I'm not sure the time frame that he spent on this, but it was years. And that's Jeremy Myers, and he works for the Space Institute down at in Alabama.
I want to talk about your dad. Now, ultimately, he was a lawyer in town, but let's back up a little bit. He signed up and went off to World War II with his twin brother. Is that correct? So tell me a little bit about that.
Well, Daddy did something that Mother never forgave him for because he was too old to go. And Carter was his identical twin. I could not tell my father and my uncle apart. They even smelled alike. When Pearl Harbor was bombed, they went down the next day and enlisted, and they had to bribe and lie about their age before the Army would take them. And luckily, they both came home.
And Dad was injured, though.
Yes,
and he was gone, I think you said 4.5 years.
4.5 years, because he came home with a Purple Heart, of course, and but he sustained some injuries that followed him for the rest of his life.
And your mother made some changes in your family life and your sisters and moved you in with an aunt in Kentucky.
Technically, I was raised for the first 5 years of my life with 2 mothers. And my uncle became my stand-in daddy.
I remember you telling me some stories about things he taught you, but you told me a cute story about how he got you involved politically in Knoxville.
Our family has always been up to their knees, as we say in the South, in politics. And at 5.5 to 6, I was standing at the polls with campaign cards, pushing whoever Dad was for, you know, in that election.
And he taught you to use an instrument that nowadays people would say, I can't believe that happened. But what did he teach you?
Oh, well, before I was 8, I could shoot every gun we owned. And the kick was so strong on a shotgun that he'd have to back me up against a tree because it would throw me backwards. And of course, that would horrify anybody at this time.
You were a pistol-packing Southern belle.
And I've never been afraid of guns. I'm afraid of some of the people that have guns, however.
Okay. Your mother also had a career.
She was the executive secretary for the circuit court judges for 30 years.
But she did teach you some things at home. One of the things she taught you was to sew. What did you start learning to sew doing?
I started making clothes for my dolls and had the little bitty Singer sewing machine that so many of you all out there probably own.
I had one.
Yes.
You also carried that skill over to get you into elementary school here. You had lots of things you liked about school when you started, but you were still sewing, but you also were involved musically.
My mother told me actually that when I learned to talk, I started singing in bed. Of course, I didn't know any songs, so I guess I was making up my own.
When you were in 5th grade, I think, that had to do with Abraham Lincoln, that you told me one day, and you got to hear this, people.
Oh, that was probably the most embarrassed I've ever been at school. We were learning about Abraham Lincoln, and in the information they mentioned that his law office was above the general store in Springfield, Illinois, of Joshua Speed. And I was just undone, and I held my little hand up and I said, and that was my cousin. And I almost got sent to the office because she thought I was lying.
When you got to high school, you continued singing and doing things. You also continued sewing. You made most of your own clothes.
Yes.
And you did a lot of volunteering, but you were in a special chorus when you were in high school.
Well, we had a performing chorus in our high school, and then our entire chorus went to all-state chorus in Memphis my senior year in high school. But I remember that so fondly because the pianist was from Knoxville, Tennessee. So Tennessee, East Tennessee shone.
You lived in this area except when you lived in Kentucky for a short time. And so you've seen Knoxville grow. I mean, when I got here, they had just finished doing the Tennessee Theater, but that must have been in its original state. What was the first time you ever were in there? Because it's fabulous.
I can remember, and our audience will relate to this because musicals were fabulous when we were growing up. Going to see Betty Grable in some big whoop-de-doo at the Tennessee, and I was probably 6.
And you were here. Was it in the 80s the World Fair was developed here?
Yes. Knoxville was so proud to be the presenter of a World's Fair. And then the critics came down and said we built it in a ditch. So we weren't real pleased with that. But that opened our town to the world.
You went to UT, and I'll inject a little note here. Jane went to UT, her husband Frank went to UT, and she has 3 children that all went to UT. And to top that off, they were all born in the same hospital in Knoxville. So you went off to college.
Well, I started out in home ec and was informed by the dean of the college that I had no domestic skills and would never learn to sew. And I was sitting there in a dress I had made at that moment. And it made me so mad, I walked out the door and switched over to education.
During college, in the earlier years of your life, you were involved so much with fashion, and you modeled for at least 10 years very actively. But I remember a story. One day, was it a cafeteria you were in? When you looked across the room and you saw the person that turned out to be Prince Charming. What did you notice about him that caught your attention?
What caught my attention was his twinkling blue eyes, and he had on a blue V-neck sweater. And I really liked him, and I wasn't even over there yet.
So how do you handle that?
Well, when I went over to sit down with him, the only empty chair at the table was next to Frank, and we just started talking, and he called me that night, and this year we celebrated our 60th wedding anniversary.
We'll talk a little bit more about Frank and you in a minute. One day we had a conversation, and we were talking about going to college in those years. It's very different than going to college now. We talked about clothing. When you were on campus, there were rules, and then there were rules when you were off campus, and sometimes you figured out ways to get around those rules.
Well, one of the cardinal sins, and it's hard to even talk about this because it's so foreign to us now, women were not allowed to wear pants. And if you had on jeans or slacks, even on Saturday and Sunday, you had to wear your raincoat over them. And our raincoats came down to mid-calf, so it kind of hid the fact that we had pants on.
I wonder what they can't do now.
Walk around absolutely naked, I guess.
All right, let's talk about Prince Charming.
My mother did not like Frank because I think she sensed from the very beginning that this was Prince Charming, and he wasn't going away.
You told me the story, and it's unusual in that it was in another state, it was in bad weather, and I asked you that day, did he get down on his knee? And he did, I believe you said.
We were in Naples, Florida, but in those days, two unmarried people could not have gone to Naples, Florida. So his mama went with us and his grandmama, who I loved, and we were faced with Hurricane Donna. So we walked down to the beach the evening before the hurricane was supposed to hit. And we got down there, and Frank did. He said, I've got to ask you something very, very important. And he reached in his pocket and opened this little box, and there was that ring. And he said, will you marry me? And I just started crying because I was not expecting that. I was kind of preoccupied with the hurricane that was headed toward us. If he had not done that, that ring would have been gone because it totally destroyed our house. We were staying in our uncle's house. My ring would have blown away with the tidal wave.
Well, you lucked out.
Yes.
You had a very nice wedding.
Yes.
You got married in Knoxville.
Mm-hmm.
And where'd you go on your honeymoon?
Frank said, well, we haven't been to Cincinnati. Let's go to Cincinnati.
So your early life with Frank then involved many things. You were a color and fashion coordinator and consultant.
And that was so popular. You'll all remember Color Me Beautiful, using pieces of material. And you look in a mirror, and most of you have had this done. You are definitely more attractive in certain colors, certain shades than others. And it's winter, spring, summer, and fall.
And you were involved somehow with the East Tennessee State Mental Hospital?
Frank and I did a lot of volunteer work over there.
You took part in the Dogwood Arts Festival for years?
Yes, I was on the board of that and for 10 years.
Oh,
and had every job they had except for being the chairman of the festival. About 3 or 4 years later, two of us were called out of retirement, and we started the Dogwood Arts Lawn and Garden Fair.
Okay. Knoxville Girls Club.
Yes.
And
All my
also
babies.
the Knoxville Museum of Art.
Both of those times were teaching times. I taught sewing and cooking and had a chorus. I'm always having a chorus, if you notice, from the little girls. And then at the Museum of Art, I was a docent there for years.
Let's talk a little bit about your family life that came about. You have 3 children. Jennifer is the oldest, and she has 2 children. And what was her passion at UT and has been her whole life passion?
Dance. And she has Arts in Motion. She still has that down in Kingston. And as one of the Roane County people said, she brought culture to Roane County. I love that.
You have Frank the Third,
Uh-huh.
and he has 3 children, and his career is similar to his brother Andy's, or Andrew, who has 2 children, and they share the same career, the same company, and the same thing that their father. You people just love each other so much, you do everything together. And so they work for...
Well, they followed their daddy into the investment world.
You have a house that's a vacation home, but you spend like 3 or 4 months there. Normally, the COVID kind of ruined that this year.
Right.
But you go there to Breckenridge, Colorado, to a beautiful home on the side of a mountain. And you all skied when you first went out there, I'm sure. Now let's jump over to Tellico Village. You're retired, you left Nashville, you came to Tellico Village. You really got involved in Tellico Village because you were more retired than ever, as a lot of people here are. One of the first stories you told me was about Ladies' Day, how that came about. That's where the ladies, as most of you know, go for lunch, have a fashion show.
Tom Short was the manager at the yacht club when we first moved here, and he called one day and he said, "Can you help me? I want to set up a country club ladies' day with fashion show." And I said, "I certainly can." And we had no advertising. And I went down there that first time. I thought, there are not going to be 3 people here. And I walked in the room and we had 35 women, and it looked like 3,000 because I had expected there to be nobody. And he never told me to stop doing it, so I did it for 22 years.
And it's still going on. The
Yes.
first Wednesday of every month, there's a fashion show and all kinds of little booths where you can buy all kinds of goodies. Women's Club you got involved with.
We started a General Federated Women's Club here, and it's still here. And I had the pleasure and the honor of being their first full-time president.
Tellico Village and Knoxville's churches, you were involved in both of them. You're very active in the guild and running the kitchen.
And that was at Church of the Ascension in Knoxville. I never told Tellico Community Church of that talent.
Tellico Community Players, and we have shared a role. We've both played Mame in theater productions, and you did that and some other parts for the Tellico Players when they didn't have a home. Where did they do all these shows before I got here?
Anywhere we could. We did them at the yacht club. As far as the players were concerned, the yacht club floor is flat, so it was hard to do a play there.
Yeah. And you have been very involved with the Knoxville Symphony and the Knoxville Symphony League. You are a past president, friendlily known in that group as the Queen.
Well, thank you.
And wonderful job of being their president. And you, I don't know if you started doing it, but when you go to the yacht club at Thanksgiving time and you see all those wonderful decorations for Christmas, Jane headed the committee and bought a lot of the decorations. There's a ton of them on all 3 floors. That started with you too, I believe.
It really did, and Karen Keith has taken that over and does a fabulous job with it. But I was told that the yacht club had their own Christmas decorations. And when I got there, they had a plastic blow-up Santa Claus, a blow-up plastic snowman. And I walked into the office and I said, "Get rid of those and I will be back." And I went home and made some telephone calls. And we didn't have anything much to use, but we did get it decorated, and then we started full scale the next year.
And you can all see where it's gone from there.
Yes.
The thing you really do best that I just love, you love gardening.
Mm-hmm.
And her garden, this time of year particularly, is just full of the most wonderful displays of flowers, of statuary. Every holiday is done inside and out. What is your favorite Southern dish?
Probably fried green tomatoes.
What's your favorite Southern custom?
I think being able to talk to everybody. Southerners communicate with each other whether they know each other or not.
What's your favorite location in the South?
Charleston.
Charleston? Okay.
Don't even have to think.
What's been the Academy Award of being a Southern belle or living here?
I think the Southerners' appreciation of tradition. I have watched our world get more and more casual, which is bothersome to me. If I have guests, I want it in, to use my dining room and my china and my crystal. And when I first started having things at my house, it got back to me that Jane is putting on airs. And I thought, in what regard? I mean, I didn't even understand what they were talking about until somebody told me, well, we just like things really casual. And I said, well, don't expect that when you come to my house, honey, because I use my stuff.
Do you think the South is going to change with the current generation and dining? I know most people that I know, including my own, don't leave the good china to me. I don't want it. We don't have people for dinner. We all go out to dinner, and it seems such a shame because there's so many wonderful customs in the South.
Yes, I share the same fear that she's expressing, because I hate for the niceties to go away.
I saved this till the end, and I want to wind this up. Give me your hand. Okay. As some of you know, the COVID has ruined almost everything we tried to do this year. I mean, here at the studio, at our churches, in school for our kids, trips we had planned. It's really been bad, and hopefully it's going to get better. I hope all of you are wearing your masks when you're in places that you're not feeling secure. If you haven't had your shots, please go out and get them. And but I want to say, Jane, and some of you know this and some of you don't, Jane and her Prince Charming, Frank, both contracted the COVID. They both ended up in the hospital. Jane left, but Frank did not make it. And I just want to say I am so proud of how you and your children and your family have handled this. I mean, it's just amazing. You just all, and I guess this maybe is part of being Southerners, but I'm just so proud of how you handled it and how you're handling your garden and getting out your good china. And you know what? I know Frank is proud of you too.